Okay, welcome to another session here. We appreciate you joining. My name is Bob Buchanan. I am the Executive Vice President of Sales for Cox Cloud Solutions. And today, we got a really educational format to discuss securing your remote workforce. As always, this webinar will be recorded, and we do send out the session usually the day after. I also note from a house cleaning item, if questions do come up, we'd love to answer them, but we'll probably hold those to the end, and you can submit those questions via chat. Thank you very much. So before we get started, let me just say what this is and what it isn't. What this isn't today is any type of sales pitch. What it is awareness around the threats that exist and making sure you might know how to protect your business. I think you'll find it incredibly educational. It'll also hopefully maybe cause you to think, how can I do more? How can I, if you find a vulnerability or identify a vulnerability that might be impacting your business, what action can you take? If you've been on previous sessions, you know already that this is all powered. Cox Cloud Solutions is powered by RapidScale, which has been in business well over a decade. The business was acquired in 2018, and today we are the business unit for all things cloud within Cox Business. You might think of why we're different. Number one, we're part of a great company, a privately held business that's been around for 120 plus years, as you know. But I think equally as important is we have, and this is part of the Cox culture, right? We put incredible emphasis on the customer experience. We monitor NPS every single month, and we're averaging at about 78, which is off the charts. From a service standpoint, we do commonly focus on things like desktop as a service, infrastructure as a service, SD-WAN, disaster recovery as a service, and certainly our core connectivity suite of offerings. And in summary, how we help our clients is many of our customers today are their IT teams are stretched, so we're an extension of them, and we help in closing the IT kind of capacity gap. So you're able to offload non-strategic workloads and activities to us while you focus on the strategic part of the business. And then lastly, I always like to think about us being able to ensure that every customer is able to access their applications and key data from anywhere at any time on any device. And that really is the summary of the elevator pitch. But today is about security, and we could not provide a comprehensive suite of security offerings without strategic partners, and Mimecast is at the top of that list. Today we're joined by Luis Gonzalez, who's going to talk to us about some of these threats that exist and what you need to be aware of. When I think about Mimecast, and I think, well, let me say this, when I think about security in general, it's such a broad topic, and I think most of the time we're focused on the front door, the brute force threats, or maybe the backdoor application vulnerabilities. Oftentimes, the weakest link may in fact be the human element, our employees. So, Luis, with that, let me turn it over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So a little bit of myself. I've been a Mimecast Enterprise Sales Engineer for going on 3 years now. Very proud to be part of this organization. And really have just gotten the opportunity to experience firsthand what is happening in most enterprises. Here at Mimecast, just to give you a little bit more background and an idea of who Mimecast is, we have over 38,000 customers worldwide. We are a public company with over 1,700 plus employees, and we have a unique vantage point because we are helping to secure businesses via the email attack vector and web. So we have a lot of traffic that goes through our global platform. And from that perspective, from that vantage point, is that we're going to be talking about email threats today and how to secure the remote workforce. So here's some interesting statistics about the data breaches and how they impact organizations. 94% of all organizations have experienced phishing attacks in the last 12 months. And the life cycle of a breach typically spans 279 days. That means from the time the incident occurs to the time the incident is contained. And you could imagine a lot can happen in that time frame. The average cost of a breach in the U.S. is about $3.92 million, almost $4 million. So this kind of sets the stage for us to understand the magnitude of the problem. When we understand that, and we also need to understand that this is a problem that is impacting all business sizes. As you can see here in this chart, the average cost of a breach for an organization from 500 to 1,000 employees is not that far off from the cost of a breach to an organization that has 1,000 to 5,000 users. So this really shows how the cost and the long-term cost of a data breach is affecting all sizes of business. So it's important, is relevant, and it's something that we need to be aware of. Over 1/3 of the data breach costs occur more than 1 year after the data breach incident occurs. So the long-term ramifications are pretty powerful. If you guys can remember the Target breach, for example, my data was part of that data that was exposed to the attackers, and Target had to pay for an identity monitoring service long after the breach occurred, and that doesn't even include the fines. So if I could remember correctly, the cost of the Target breach as of last year had exceeded over $200 million is the last figure I had seen. So that is something that is mind-blowing. How far-reaching those breaches are impacting the organization and the customers of the organization. So what are some of the problems, right, that are leading to the data breaches, or that can inevitably expose organizations to a data breach? We're hearing from organizations that they're short-staffed, that there's a skill shortage, that there's employee burnout, that there's legacy processes in place, and in some cases can be overkill. And then sometimes with organizations doing a migration to the cloud, it could be non-existing processes because IT and security really doesn't understand how to protect that data, right? And also the volume of threats. Every day we're getting bombarded by new threats and new vulnerabilities that can be exploited. And having visibility into those environments is going to be critical. So as we talk to customers, we try to understand what is the data that they're trying to protect, right? Why is this topic relevant to most organizations? Well, if you think about the data that we store in the email systems, in most organizations, an email system, it's almost like an archiving or a system of records, an informal system of records, but we hold valuable intellectual property. Hackers are after sensitive research or intellectual property. In some cases, companies have access to patient data, credit card history, personal information. This information can be sold or used to commit identity theft, payroll theft, tax fraud. We also have access to internal applications, large customer databases, rich with personal details, and even payroll systems. And it can also be information about internal systems and procedures. So if we look at how hackers are being successful, right? The attackers are leveraging, in some cases, exploiting vulnerabilities, or sometimes the fact that users haven't been properly trained. But the traditional mechanisms that they're using to exploit, as Bob mentioned, the weakest link, have been phishing attacks, have been malware in some cases, and ransomware as well. And the reason why these attacks are fairly successful is because it is really taking advantage of social engineering tactics, exploiting the the end users, right? And they're the fact that they sometimes cannot spot these type of attacks. Sometimes it can be a user that is negligent, but in most cases, it's a careless user that just assumes that security should protect them and will keep them safe. They're basically shifting the responsibility. And in the world that we live in, this is not good enough anymore. Everybody has the role to play in security. Here at Mimecast, how we see how security should be protected or email should be protected is what we call the Email 3.0 framework. And this is a framework that focuses the attention into what we call the perimeter, inside the organization, beyond the perimeter, and also integrating with the larger ecosystem. So these are what we call zones. And I'm going to talk about it in more detail here in a second, how we're helping to protect organizations. But I'm not going to get into a product sales pitch, but more talking about the type of threats that exist in each of those zones and what are some of the things that we need to be aware of, and also share this information with end users so that they can be more realistic about the type of attacks that they should expect to see and how to identify those. So let's dig in. When we look at what we call the zone 1, the perimeter, we're looking at phishing attacks, malicious URLs, ransomware, malware, spam as well can be categorized here, viruses, and also the most common ones that we see are phishing or whaling attacks, right? The reason why these attacks are prevalent and are really impacting our businesses is because they're very low-cost attacks, right? It's easier for an attacker to exploit a user than it is to find a vulnerability in our firewalls and try to breach our firewalls, right? So you can see a traditional impersonation attack that can be as simple as somebody using a Gmail address to impersonate an executive or impersonate a VIP. One of the threats that I started to see as I talk to customers on our that are on the platform or prospects is that attackers are using these techniques and impersonating a VIP, pretending to be using a personal email address. That's a really simple attack. You can register Gmail and pretend to be an executive. There are tools out there that attackers are using to scan your website, figure out who your executives are, and figure out what your the email pattern is for the organization. One such tool is called Hunter, which is a Chrome add-on. And the reason why I like to mention that is to make you aware. It might be important for you guys to look at the Hunter tool, see what email addresses you're publishing, and make sure that you're not providing the email addresses of your executives or exposing those, giving the attackers an opportunity to do more reconnaissance through your websites, right? If we look at a common impersonation, here is an impersonation that Mimecast received many years. This is an older one from 2015, but it led us to innovate in our technology because we started to realize what are the indicators of an attack that are common to most impersonations and how we can detect those, how we can educate our users, and how we can enable our systems, our security admins to stop these type of threats and be more proactive. So to give you more context here, this was an email that an attacker crafted trying to impersonate our our chief financial officer. And it was an email that was intended, the recipient was our controller. So what we can see as an indicator of an attack is the impersonation of the display name, right? We also see that they leveraged a lookalike domain. And this domain was registered 3 days before they actually launched the attack. So newly registered domains. It's not very likely that an attacker registers a new domain and sends an email or sends a fake invoice, for example. So that's an indicator of an attack that we recognize. So lookalike domains, display name impersonations. We also look at keywords in the email, such as the request for wiring transfers, a sense of urgency. You can see here that they requested that email to be sent yesterday, the payment. Reply to mismatch is another indicator that we see very often here at Mimecast, where somebody's using a Gmail account, for example, or a Freemail domain or a lookalike domain, and there's a reply to mismatch, and also VIP impersonation. So those are common indicators of an attack that we see. And frankly, we look forward to receiving those emails and stopping those. So if we look at something that is very relevant in this current climate, anytime that there is a crisis, attackers are looking to leverage that. So the hot topic right now is COVID-19. And our research shows that in the short period between March 9th and March 20th, that more than 60,000 new domain registrations tied to COVID-related items were detected. That means that there was over 6,000 new domains registered per day. And these are the type of attacks that we're seeing that could lead to credential harvesting or downloading malware or ransomware. So in this particular email, it was a phishing attack targeting medical professionals, asking them to join a mandatory seminar on the coronavirus. I've also seen fake voicemail directed to staff, asking them to listen to a voicemail, and it's asking them to download an attachment that is infected, of course. So these are the type of things that we're seeing on a daily basis by analyzing billions of emails for our customers in our platform. If we look at the internal email, this is another popular attack vector. We call this the zone 2, inside the perimeter. A lot of organizations are currently not scanning or not actively scanning email that is going from one internal user to another. So that is leaving organizations exposed. Studies have shown that the average volume of email that an organization produces, about 60 to 80% of that email is internal email, right? And when you have a user that has been compromised, that her credentials have been stolen, what attackers are doing is they're sending malicious emails with malicious URLs to the rest of the staff, so they can propagate throughout the organization and have backups in case they are discovered and the access gets shut down. They try to spread within the organization to make sure that they can be persistent. And again, that goes back to how long a breach can occur. If you remember one of my opening slides, it was 279 days. So that's a common tactic that they're using. They're also using malicious attachments. So they will use fake PDFs, for example, fake Word documents that contain macros or malware. So scanning this attack vector is going to be very, very important. And also training your users to be aware of the type of attacks that are commonly used by the attackers to expand. A best practice that a customer shared with us was the fact that they do a newsletter that they send out every 2 weeks to the internal staff, explaining to them the most common threat that they've seen and making them aware, because typically an attacker will use common tactics and repeat them and send them to different distribution lists within the organization. So that was a best practice shared with a customer that I think has proven very effective, and I'd like to share that with anybody that is willing to listen. Another thing is also notify internal administrators and let them know, or managers, about the threats that are facing the individual teams. In a lot of cases, when we're doing analysis of live traffic, for example, we do see a lot of patterns where people are asking, update your W-2s, for example, in an HR type of scam, or send us your updated wire transfer information. So those are emails that we've seen that are being leveraged to try to gain information once a credential harvesting attack has happened. And also provide security awareness and continuous security awareness. in a lot of cases, 90% of all security incidents involve human error. Bob said at the beginning that this was the weakest link, and it's true. And you got to make sure that that customers are engaged and that the end users are engaged, and that the content is something that you can deliver continuously. Because what we're seeing is that organizations are not really teaching relevant content. They're sort of checking the box, and checking the box for compliance doesn't really equate to security anymore. If we look at what we consider the zone 3, beyond the perimeter, what are some ways that we can help end users and make them safe? Again, the idea now that you have a lot of remote, the majority of the remote workforce working from home, we internally believe that it's important to protect users through web security, for example, and teach about protecting your brand and domain impersonations of the supply chain. A customer of ours shared an experience that they had paid out over $600,000. This is before they became a customer. This was a prospect, but they had paid out over $600,000 to a supply chain impersonation because somebody pretended to be a supplier, sent a fake invoice, and they paid out money. Thankfully, they were able to get half of the money. But unfortunately, they did suffer a loss of $300,000, and they were not able to recuperate that money. So this is another point that attackers are leveraging. So that's why it's important to understand the different zones. And I'm going to go ahead and give you some examples of that. So let me go ahead and show you. There is a website called DNS Twister, and you could run a report on your domains and also the domains of your suppliers. And these are things that we're commonly seeing, that attackers will run a domain variation report, as I mentioned, looking at DNS Twister being one of them. And they see, how many domains are available that they can use to impersonate your internal domains. So in our case, we noticed that there was over 275 available domains, and that could be registered to impersonate or spoof the Mimecast domain. If they simply register these domains, then they can use that to do an impersonation attack, or also to send unique URLs that are bypassing legacy checks. So those are important aspects, and I'm going to show you this in action. Let me show you what that looks like. So most of you may be familiar with this company called Paychex, which is a payroll and an HR solution provider. It's a company that many customers use, and I took the liberty of going onto the DNS Twister website, running a report, and I found out that they have over 259 domains that are similar to Paychex. And if you notice here, if you take a close look, you can see that they're leveraging a homoglyph attack. This is an attack where they're leveraging a domain, a universal domain that looks, when it's rendered by the devices, like a regular P in this case. So substituting the P in Paychex by a non-ASCII character. And if you see that, you type in that domain inside GoDaddy, for example, I can register this domain, and most end users, when they receive that email, will not notice that this is coming from a fake Paychex domain. So this is how easy it is for attackers to register a lookalike domain or a domain that is using a homoglyph attack. And in this case, when users are remote, looking at it from a personal device, looking at it from a mobile device, is really, really hard to spot these type of attacks. And that's why you need technology to be able to help you. A real world example in our test environment, you can see is we have a demo domain called 228, and we registered a lookalike domain. And one of the things that internally I think is the best practice to share with organizations is to be able to do messaging or tagging of the emails in a way that is not desensitizes the users. Be specific on your messaging And you can see here that this domain, this lookalike domain, is using, again, a homoglyph attack. It's a non-ASCII W, but for most users, unless you zoom in, you won't see it. In most mobile devices, you don't see the full email address being displayed. So for that reason, it's important to make sure that your messaging is very specific to point out why an attack is or an email shouldn't be delivered to the end users. And if you're releasing them, make sure you're tagging it in the body. In this case, we tag the message body with HTML to show them that it came from a lookalike domain that was leveraging a homoglyph attack, right? So that's key to make sure that your users are not desensitized. In the current climate that we're in today, nations of, for example, Zoom, which is a popular web meeting solution. Yahoo, for example, reported that hackers were exploiting the coronavirus lockdown with fake Netflix and Disney Plus pages. Those are common exploits that we're seeing being leveraged against users, because everybody's trying to figure out what to do with their time, right? So they're leveraging the current climate, the current conditions to exploit users. And that could be your end users at home, or it can be your end users, again, behind your security systems. But because they're registering unique lookalike domains, that's exposing you. And that can be your own domain, or it can be the domains of your suppliers. So that's going to be important. If we look at the detrimental effects of a cyber attack, why is this important? It can lead to reputational damage. It can lead to loss of customers, identity theft. It can lead to difficulty attracting talent to your organization, and again, significant financial losses in cases of fines. So let's go ahead and talk about, what are some practical examples. I've already mentioned some of these, but I'm also going to expand on some of these here in the next few slides. If we look at a high level, security training is always effective, especially for your security staff. Integrating your systems to make sure that your security vendors are working together are going to be important, and leveraging automation to protect the remote workforce. An example of that it's important, for example, it's a very popular use case that we're starting to leverage today with the current technology, is make your security vendors or your current email gateway provider work with your firewall providers, right? If you're seeing a malicious email and you detect a malicious URL, share that threat intelligence with the firewall provider so that you can also block the malicious URLs or the domains, for example, at the firewall level. So you're protecting multiple attack vectors. The same can be said about endpoints. If you're not leveraging a cloud solution provider that has modern APIs and prepackaged applications into your other ecosystem solutions, you're doing your own workforce a disservice. You can take advantage of the automations that are available through the different technology providers that are in most cases are part of the solutions, but a lot of organizations are not leveraging those. Make sure you test different plans, different scenarios. When we've done real world tabletop exercises, it's amazing how many issues come to the surface that were not previously configured. So make sure you're testing and updating your plans, and account for scenarios that that may not be something you've covered in your disaster recovery plan, for example, as well. And prioritize risk for your remote workers based on whether the current conditions. As I mentioned, educate yourselves. We provide a lot of information about threat intelligence that we're seeing across our global platform from the anonymized data or the metadata that we see. If we look at the threat intelligence of the current climate, we have seen the first 100 days of coronavirus pandemic, a 33.5% rise in malicious activity, especially around spam and impersonations. And unsafe clicks have increased by more than 55% as malicious actors exploit the perfect storm. So as you can see, email and web are still primary attack vectors and are going to continue to be as you have more and more users working remotely. So some practical examples just to recap. Make sure that your email gateway can detect impersonations, both for lookalike domains, custom domains, or homoglyph attacks, that you're leveraging technologies that can detect newly observed domains, display name impersonations, reply to mismatch, and other indicators of an attack, and that you're leveraging DLP technologies to detect or identify keywords that are used during these impersonations. When it comes to implementing awareness training, understand that when organizations are actively training users on a monthly basis, their end users are less likely to click on a malicious link. Based on the studies that we've seen on actual customers that are using awareness training, people that are not leveraging awareness training, their employees are 5 times more likely to click on a malicious link than users that have been trained. So that's really important. The IBM Polyman research that I shared at the beginning also talked about how employee training helps to decrease the total cost of a data breach by, in some cases, $270,000. So that's going to be very critical. Make sure that you're, again, mentioning or protecting your end users through web-based filtering. So that's going to be important. And one thing that I did not touch on that is also important is that a lot of documents that are being shared within the organization or sharing to external parties, from external parties, are leveraging documents that are, in most cases, read-only documents, PDFs or Word documents that are not being edited. So you can enable technologies such as safe file conversion to make sure that you're removing macros, that you're removing malware from the end user's mailboxes. You deliver a safe copy, a safe read-only copy. So it's helping to de-risk those threats. And when they're being received by your end users, on average, most end users will click on an attachment in under 4 minutes. So that's going to be important. And for the remote workers, educate them to update security of the home Wi-Fi network by using strong passwords. Make sure that you have updated contact information and that they're using multi-factor authentication whenever possible, especially if they're logging into Outlook Web Access, to make sure credential harvesting attacks are decreased. Make sure that you're telling them, educating them about not clicking on COVID-related attachments in the current climate if they're coming from outside of the trusted network perimeter. Make sure that they're double-checking the URLs and that you educate them about the potential for homoglyph attacks or unique lookalike domains, even from emails that can look like a trusted internal source or a trusted partner. And make sure that they're only updating usernames and passwords from trusted sites. So those are some suggestions. We're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Now, I know there was a lot of materials, but I'm not sure if there's any questions in the chat that we can answer today.
Yep, we'll get started. So the first one is, do I need to have all of my services in the cloud?
What I will tell you is that the cloud has advanced tremendously, and in some cases can offer more security controls than the on-prem alternatives. And a lot of vendors are not updating on-prem solutions. So there could be benefits to moving to the cloud, and also the majority of the cloud, because they're leveraging APIs, the cloud solutions, the cloud vendors are integrating their solutions to the larger ecosystems. So there could be benefits, and I'm not sure if Bob from the Cox Business Solutions side may have any suggestions.
No, I think that's spot on. Common question we often get is, can I leverage these solutions from Mimecast if I'm using either Office 365 in the cloud, or if I have my Exchange platform in-house or with another vendor? And the answer is yes. It doesn't matter necessarily if it's on-prem or in the cloud, but your points around best practices and the security posture of the cloud providers is very accurate.
Awesome. Next, how difficult is it to have a secure platform put in place to protect my business, and how long does it take to implement something like this?
Bob, do you want to comment from your side?
Well, I think that the question most likely is Mimecast specific. I mean, obviously, having the appropriate security posture for your business could be a far more comprehensive type discussion. But Luis, why don't you answer from mail perspective and what we kind of talked about today?
Absolutely. So securing email is fairly straightforward. There's a little bit of planning that goes through because email is so critical. For larger enterprises, which is part of the team that I participate in, typically it could be from anywhere from 3 weeks on average. And the reason is that we do a lot of work ahead of time to make sure that we understand the use cases and we're not stopping email flow. But it can that process or that time frame can be shortened depending on your requirements and depending on your change control process and if you want to do customizations. So the time to value is very short.
Would you put that in just to follow up, Luis, would you put that in and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just from a perspective, are we talking weeks, months, years?
Oh, no, the time to value is weeks, definitely. I've seen implementations go very quickly. And again, the biggest determining factor in that is the internal processes. For us, if we wanted to turn it up in a day, we can do that, right? It's very straightforward. But I don't advocate for that because we need to make sure we partner long-term. I like what you said at the beginning. We are an extension of the internal IT systems. So there's a process to make sure that onboarding a customer is successful, and it's a repeatable process.
Excellent.
Okay, I believe this one was in reference to your final slide, Luis. So let me know if you know what this is talking about. But what are some of the sites that might be helpful in keeping organizations up to speed on current malicious activity?
I would tell you to partner with your vendors. For example, we publish a lot of information through our blog of the threat intelligence we see and we've done during the COVID-19 crisis. We've done briefings, weekly briefings that was frankly where I got some of this content from, talking about how, what are the lookalike domains that are exploiting the most common lookalike domains, the type of attacks that we see. So also, I would ask you to or recommend that you leverage Cox Business Solutions. You have professionals in the security practice that are constantly looking to share a wealth of knowledge with the end users about what are some best practices, what is new technologies you can leverage. But vendors is one of them, and also Krebs and Security is one of them that I like to recommend. Personally, because he's always doing a lot of very good investigative research.
Is that Brian Krebs?
Yes.
Yeah, he's excellent. I don't know if you have the website, but he's probably the leading expert on security out there right now.
Yeah, we can share the website as part of the follow-up.
Perfect.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left, so keep chatting in if you guys want to. Next. With regard to the threat intelligence report, can you talk about the volume of emails that are tracked to determine these specific trends that you're seeing from hackers?
Oh, yes. So at Mimecast, we're receiving billions of emails. I believe the latest threat report analyzed over 292 million emails globally. Billion emails, I'm sorry. So it's a large amount that we see on a daily basis.
Awesome. And what are some best practices for user education around security?
Summer, I'm not sure I heard the question properly. Do you mind repeating it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. what are some best practices for user education around security?
Thank you. Yes. So I think the main feedback that we've seen, and also the data shows this, is to make sure that you're providing content that is engaging, that is being delivered on a continuous basis. A lot of organizations that were doing annual training, really we're not seeing the fruits of that training pay off. So also make sure that you train your end users first before you try to phish them, or before you try to put them in a situation where they're not going to have the right tools to detect attacks. It's very important that you're being proactive. And the reason for that is because users, if they feel that they're being shamed, are not responding well to training. That's something that we've seen in our own internal research.
All right. It looks like we're good to go on questions if you want to wrap it up, Bob.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Summer. Luis, thank you. That was awesome. You know, we do these quite frequently, and great content as always. Don't ever like to use fear as a motivator, but I can't tell the audience how many times we hear clients say, you know what, it won't. We're pretty confident it won't happen to me. The threats are real. We could cite example after example of where our clients have run into, unfortunately, these type of circumstances, and the consequences are great, as Luis pointed out. If you'd like to learn more about this content, obviously, please let us know. The best way to do that is to connect with your Cox business representative, and they'll put you in touch with the Cox Cloud team specifically. And it certainly, if you're learning more, is part of it. But if you're looking to learn more about the partnership between Cox Cloud and Mimecast, we'll be happy to educate you there as well, along with how you'll be able to mitigate some of these threats. So thanks again, and until next time, please stay safe, and we appreciate you joining us today. Take care.